Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? Pistols and fondle slap of choice, I don't know, computers don't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to just read these two sources whenever I try to prove out. It's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed on another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man, huh?
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2, within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And that is that. I am live on UCY.TV radio. And it is the 18th of December, 2014. Good evening to everybody who has decided to tune in. Come to ucy.tv/TOE. All the people in the chat room or whoever decides to bother to put up with my voice for the next 2 hours. I do appreciate all of you. Isn't it interesting, the world we live in? I'm watching this whole thing unfold with regards to this, cyber attack nonsense and the North Koreans and all of that kind of good stuff. Okay? I'm watching that happen and I'm wondering to myself, and now I'm going to wonder aloud to you, that what kind of crap is this exactly? I mean, is anybody really buying this? Is anybody really this asleep? I saw a little meme out there among the many millions of memes that get lost in the major streams of things. And you know what? I saw one that said, one of the Morpheus ones, everybody likes to grab the whole Larry Fishburne deal and grab Morpheus and say, hey, let's point out this obvious thing or let's point out that obvious thing. But one of them was kind of funny. Okay, and it was, what if I told you that Sony hacked themselves? Yeah, I'm kind of starting to buy that, and I'll tell you what else. This is a major, massive distraction. So, yet again, one of these major weapons of mass distraction. We're going to pump up the whole North Korean thing. I mean, it almost smacks of rebuilding the possibility of having another one of those. Well, we had something called the Korean conflict at one point, didn't we? I love that scene in Back to School where Sam Kinison goes off on Rodney Dangerfield about it, but I digress. Anyway, tonight we're not going to sit and discuss that and all that kind of nonsense, and who cares if another Seth Rogen film was going to bomb anyway, because it deserves to. Oh, my opinion again. But instead, I'm going to have a gentleman on with me tonight who I do appreciate quite a bit, does a show called Cancel the Cabal, and I just happen to really appreciate the way this guy does his thing, that's for sure, and I definitely advise anybody out there who listens to me to go check him out as well. Mr. Stephen Roberts, how you doing tonight, Steve?
Very good, Chuck. A lot better than I was 2 weeks ago.
Well, that's for sure. You had a little problem there, and I was a little worried about you, brother.
A lot of people were, and I do appreciate everything, all the good wishes.
Yeah, well, We can't afford to lose those that are part of the same kind of team as it is. Even though we seem to disagree and look in different directions at different points, no matter what's actually occurring on the world stage, we do have a need to retain those who seem to be on the side of getting at the reality of things, as opposed to the manufactured, sublimated dimensions of sub-realities that they create in the mainstream, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So anyway, for those that aren't familiar, though you do the show Cancel the Cabal, and what kind of stuff do you really like to focus on your show?
Well, I like to dabble in what's called the conspiracy. It's not so much a conspiracy when you look at science and you look at facts. As a lot of us know, being called a conspiracy theorist is just a sneaky way for them to try to discredit someone. It's called the ad hominem attack. If a lot of people know what that is.
Well, right, and of course, as we go to air, the mainstream media is totally involved in the conspiracy intrigue itself at this point, right? Like I said, I'm not going to focus on this too much, but a good point was made in the chat room, about these kids being killed in Pakistan, and you don't see very much about that, but, Seth Rogen's film gets canceled, and all of a sudden, we're entirely inundated with the possibilities of the North Korean cyber attack army and all this other nonsense, because Kim Jong-un is seriously a threat, no matter how many times we tell you about it, and it seems as though his inept military is not really doing very well, except breaking boards and punching cement walls on YouTube. They can't seem to launch a rocket, except every once in a while when they need a little bit of attention, they splash one down in the ocean and all that kind of stuff, and sort of wave the proverbial stick at South Korea, right?
Yeah, don't forget, Chuck. I think it was one of Bruce Lee's movies. I think it was, I'm not sure which one it was now, but it was one of his most famous movies. He told his opponent that boards didn't hit back.
Exactly.
Don't hit back.
And I do love Bruce Lee, man. Wow, definitely one of those icons from when I was a kid, and I think a little bit before too. I mean, man, I don't know a guy my age who didn't at least watch Enter the Dragon at least a dozen times, long before there were DVDs or VHSs available for us, right?
Exactly. I remember wearing out the VHS, and then I got the laser disc. The great big old thing that looked like a LP album, except it was gold most of the time.
Right, and Laserdisc, man, now you're taking me back. I remember those things. And they were like the same size as your 33 and a third piece of vinyl. Yeah, look that one up, kiddies, because you won't see those anymore. Although, there is sort of a retro thing coming back a little bit. My daughter, who's 15, she actually is starting to collect vinyl, old records and stuff, and she found one of these like compact record players, and she really appreciates the sound, and but she's weird because she's my kid, but what am I going to do? But she actually likes that analog sound that came off of those things, and yeah, we're going to get to a point though where that's going to be a something that nobody understands without having to look it up somewhere in the Google sphere. Like, for instance, the sort of emergence of Sony as a company. A lot of people forget this, but Sony was one of the first companies to come out with like a video camera, except it was something called Betamax.
Yes, it was.
Remember Betamax?
Absolutely.
It was actually better quality than the VHS, but for some reason or other, the other competitors there sort of buried the Sony Betamax model in VHS storm, right?
It never took off. Because I don't know. Maybe it was just a lot more expensive than the VHS. You know, after a while, things do start to come down in price, but it never did. And another one that many people our age might remember never took off was the in the music industry. They had the DATs, digitally attuned tapes, and that never took off either, because the CDs just kind of roared right on through and never let up.
Yeah, see, when I was a musician as a younger man, a digital audio tape was a lot cheaper than the individually recordable CDs, because at that time they were actually pressed out of gold.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people don't know that either, but there was a point in time in which we would take our 2 1/4 or whatever reel and transfer it to a digital audio tape. That was the only practical purpose for it, was for transferring and maintaining, without any sort of stretching or static buildup or anything like that after it runs through the magnetic head. The digital audio tape was helpful for that reason, and did help to preserve some music. Let's be honest, but outside of that, yeah, it was one of those things that never did quite make it. Along with the mini CDs, all these wonderful pieces of technology, and that's not even to mention the 8-tracks, which, again, had a commercial use, but didn't really last very long in the consumer market. But they were actually in use at like radio stations, at broadcasting facilities as cartridges that one could self-load. Like, you actually had to have an engineer load your tape and sit there with now I'm really going to date myself, sit there with some Scotch tape, or something like Scotch tape, I should say, and a razor blade, and literally edit stuff by hand. Yeah, I was part of that reality too, sir. So, but anyway, getting back to your show, because I know, look, I go way the hell off track. This is what I do. Sorry. But yeah, you do like to cover conspiracy angle type things, and of course that's sort of what I do also. I mean, I look at the conspiracies, but not from a standpoint of what's fascinating and what's most salacious or anything like that. But we kind of, I guess we're a little more dull and drab sometimes, because we do seem to examine things that have a factual basis, that that you can actually find corroborating evidence via open source means and things like that, right? So it's a little different than your kind of kooky conspiracy show, which there are plenty of those out there, in my opinion.
Well, like I mentioned, I think they actually invented that term conspiracy theorist just to put a label on somebody, and just to try to discredit this movement. I mean, that's, it doesn't really seem that there could be any other kind of a reason why they would do something like that.
Oh, yeah, and the term was popularized, via the original sort of releases of what we now call like modern contemporary history, which was something that up until the 1960s, the late 60s, in fact, was not something that was generally written about. The first sort of early version of, like, say, authors that would write textual documents regarding historical events was The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which was a book. The author's name escapes me at the moment, but
Jim Marrs.
Well, no. It wasn't the Jim Marrs book.
Oh.
No. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich was actually done by somebody else a few years before, but he had actually gotten unprecedented access to what are represented as captured archives from the Third Reich, which were in U.S. hands at the time. And this was a little different than what Jim Marrs came out with Crossfire in the 80s.
Jim Marrs does have a book. I think maybe it's the Fourth Reich.
Yeah, that's the Fourth Reich.
Right,
yeah,
that's right. That's what it is. Yeah,
where he contends, just very much like May Brussel does, and extremely interestingly parallel to what I talk about, which is the idea of the, of course, the reemergence of the seeds that we had already sown over in Germany during World War II and previous to World War II. The return of a lot of our assets via Operation Paperclip and all those wonderful things that we know about today, right?
I happen to agree with Jim Mars on I think the point that you might be getting to. The Nazis didn't lose World War II. Germany lost World War II. I believe probably conservatively 25 to 30% of the top Nazi elite, upper management, if you will, actually was taken out of Germany before their demise. Or hundreds and hundreds, if not more than 1,000, just of these scientists were relocated to America, South America, and other countries via paperclip, as you mentioned. And I would surmise that many of the top management also was taken out.
Well, right, and we have examples of this stuff that can be found in a fragmentary fashion, via the Vatican had their own sort of network of individuals to move people out of Germany. Yes. That's absolutely true. But there was a whole, worldwide network of people trying to pull assets out of there. And of course the American government was no different than the others.
No.
So yeah, absolutely. And of course, it is interesting in our current times, the way I see it, to watch the gnashing of teeth and the wrenching of hands regarding this reproach to normalizing relations with Cuba, right? I mean, I don't know how you feel about that. I haven't discussed it with you or anything, but have you been paying attention to that?
Not so much, really, because I think it's just contrived gibberish. It doesn't really mean much of anything. It's just another distraction, really. We need to concentrate on the American people and, just the American people. We got to worry about ourselves before we can worry about someone else. But I believe a good 95 to 98% of what gets shown on the news is nothing but a distraction. They are losing their support. The Congress and the government in general, they know this for years and years and years from the data forming. Just all of the collections of data that they've been doing off of like advertising, what you buy, what you watch, what you wear.
Yeah, they do realize that they're starting to lose ground, and the data mining operations have become a little more obvious to those of us that are paying attention. But I got to tell you, among the sleepwalkers, I mean, they're still very happy to use their club cards and whatever else to get their 50 cents off, even though they're being data based, for their buying habits and everything else. I mean,
Doug, I say it on nearly every show. The way we can beat these people is to get out of their system. Stop feeding the beast, their beast. Stop buying their clothes. Stop buying their food. Stop buying their cars. Sure, people might have to get a bicycle or walk a little more, or get an older car. I know people that have to have new cars every a couple of years, and they just because they have to, because they think that they have this certain image that they have to hold up to, and it's just image is just what it is. It's just an image. It doesn't really mean much of anything.
Well, right, and but like I say about this Cuban thing, and I'll see what you think about this. But see, I look at this in the context of when we actually severed relations after the the revolution, okay, regarding Castro.
Yeah, but did we though? Castro was a CIA asset. We trained him. Did he defect and go with communism? That can be debated.
Well, see, that's one aspect of it, but here's the other funny part to me is they say, oh, for the first time in history, you know, there's been a back-channel thing happening and the gnashing of teeth again among the supposed right wing of the purple paradigm, right? we have this whole, you know, maneuvering regarding this. Meanwhile, you know, again, 50 years ago, John F. Kennedy was attempting back-channel, you know, communications with the Castro regime. This is nothing new. We had all sorts of, you know,
Jeff, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had all sorts of adventures into Cuba regarding, you know, stuff previous to the Cuban Missile Crisis even, you know, regarding different types of, you know, black op type warfare, you know, pig viruses being spread around, you know, destruction of crops, all sorts of sabotage, you know, from the military intelligence industrial complex, as it were at the time. And this stuff continued on. And meanwhile, I see these debates regarding, you know, are we actually going to do business with, you know, some brutal regime and on and on. And I say to myself, well, isn't that hysterically funny? Yeah. Because, you know, they complain, well, this guy was trying to foment revolution all throughout Central and South America. Well, you know, I guess we could be a little bit angry as American politicians and assets because, after all, wasn't that our job, you know, for the longest time? I mean, does everybody forget that we were the ones funding death squads and backing drug cartels and everything else throughout Central and South America? I mean, doesn't this seem like just, you know, like, wow, you guys really have no clue about the context of the history you're discussing?
No. You know, a lot of people don't even realize also that I think since the 1930s, the CIA has personally agitated enough countries to start over 3,000 revolutions.
Right. I mean, and of course, we're only seeing the residual effects of what happened, and in some cases, we do have solid evidence that that's what happened. But I mean, over and over again, even if we want to be conservative about it, we could say that hundreds of regimes, regardless of what the particular feeling about them was, you know, our assets participated in, you know, destroying them, overthrowing them, you know, subverting them in one way or another, literally placing our own people on the throne. I mean, the discussions about Iran are really silly to me because, after all, you know, the Shah was our guy.
He was. We put him in power in 1953. Exactly.
Right, and then of course we extracted him later. You know, during Carter's administration. Yeah. Which you know, I don't know if you remember that, but that was a big deal. You know, in the media.
I watched a lot of that stuff on TV. 444 days of it. Yeah, I was 13 years old when that happened. Exactly.
Now, there you go. See, I was a little bit younger, but still, it's the same thing. I mean, it was a big deal, right? You know.
Yeah.
And it just kills me to watch this stuff. And I say to myself, you know, these people are trying to have these conversations about how big of a deal it is to you know, to actually have relations with this island nation and its regime, and you know, Fidel Castro once again being reintroduced as a boogeyman, despite the fact that he's been you know, virtually ignored for a very long time.
Well, you know, Chuck, you happen to mention about you know, just the media in general. The media has always just. I mean, this is just probably my opinion, and, you know, opinions are like armpits. Everybody has one, and they all stink. But the American media and the media in general around the world, I believe, have always thought themselves to be social engineers, along with Hollywood and the music industry and the entertainment system as a general and in whole. They've always wanted to be social engineers. So keeping that kind of a thing in mind, you know, you see on the TV what they want you to see. You hear on terrestrial radio what they want you to hear. I don't want to get into it tonight because we do have somebody else coming on a little bit later on, but, you know, we happen to have a little Skype message back and forth about this earlier, and I'm not going to get into it, but you know, I think that a lot of times they let us know with what they want us to know, whether it's somebody that comes out and tells on a corporation or something like that, a so-called whistleblower. As far as Snowden, somebody like him, he's heralded in the truth movement as a hero, and he's branded a traitor in the mainstream media. But he has CIA ties and backgrounds, so how can somebody trust that?
Well, right, and they've obviously, they've had control of the major outlets for the longest time, that's for sure, and they do disseminate exactly what they want to, and every once in a while they have to throw a little bit of mud in the water, to give us a couple of points now and then regarding what it is we've been researching and uncovering ourselves,
well, it's I believe it might have been G. Edward Griffin, and I think in a video I seen, maybe it was Jekyll Island or something, but he speaks of these politicians have to be changed like your underwear in the morning when you get up and take a shower or whatever, because they get to stink and people get to hollering too much, and they don't want to reveal the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, so they have to get rid of these people every now and then, and I don't know. It's just a silly metaphor, but
No, but it works perfectly because, and here's the thing: the reason why I don't take this whole North Korean thing very seriously whatsoever is, first of all, it's an attack. It's a limited attack, okay, which immediately stinks to me of something that looks like an inside job. Because if somebody really wanted to do damage to a corporation like that, they would have gone a hell of a lot further than they did. A couple of emails being leaked, a few movies getting out ahead of time. I mean, that's just, par for the course. That's the first thing. The second thing is now they're trying to prop up the idea that they have this exclusive bureau, okay, of individuals that they've trained specifically for this. And there may be, these thousands of people that are out there that are agents actually doing this in order to create chaos in the Western world. That being the case, again, if all you did is save the American public from, another one of these bomb films, big deal. First of all. Second of all, a couple of leaked emails, again, big deal. An angry girlfriend could have done more damage to Sony if she wanted to. You know what I'm saying? It's just... It's absolutely ridiculous, and it is one of those things that's a distraction, very much like the Ebola crisis, which is now gone down the memory hole. And for me, the whole thing, the whole entire ball of wax, when you take a step back regarding the the racial divides that are being ratcheted up, regarding these nonsensical buildups of the possibility that they may be able to attack our people, our country, even though Sony, to my memory, again, is a Japanese company. But anyway,
as far as this North Korea and Sony thing goes, Chuck, North Korea, Kim Jong-un couldn't wipe his nose without China's permission, and North Korea has never been able to do anything without China's permission. Mm-hmm. And as far as Sony and that, I believe it is a Japanese company, but you got to realize about the internet and some of these companies. I don't believe anyone that has a system like Sony can be hacked. They are the only ones that can do the hacking or let out this information or whatever, As far as the internet, it was, I'm sorry, it was first built for the military and government installations and military industrial complex, military intelligence complex. And I don't believe that they would let any kind of information out that they don't want let out.
Well, right. The ARPANET was a tactical and logistical tool long before we had it as a toy out here, and that is true. I'd never understand these whole, well, look, they may actually attack the power grid, and what in the world is the power grid doing accessible on the internet anyway? It just seems completely counterintuitive and just one of these made-up sort of narratives in order to, build up another boogeyman to distract you from the real boogeyman that's out there, which, of course, in my opinion, again, is the integrated corporatist complexes that actually do the damage to the world we live in.
Right.
But it just amazes me that people take this stuff seriously, And look, a win-win situation for Sony Corp, because they probably tested that movie. I mean, knowing a little bit about the industry, they tested that movie already. It was probably not going to go over well. Okay, it probably wasn't done very well because, after all, we see exactly how creative the minds are in Hollywood at this point. All they're doing is recycling fairy tales, biblical stories, reloads of everything imaginable. It's come on already.
Yeah.
And it does, and it screams of an inside job. The only people that would have leaked this stuff out, as you said, are the people that were involved in building it, storing it, and whatever. I mean, every once in a while there might be a legitimate disgruntled person who's in the employ of one of these companies that does some of this stuff in an unscheduled, unauthorized manner, maybe. But the only thing that frightens me about it is the possibility that the MPAA, which is the Motion Picture Association of America, is seriously looking to get itself involved in some SOPA action,
Sure. They've. I think the music industry tried that kind of stuff quite a few years back. Metallica really took a big hit back in the mid to late '90s. They were crying like babies, or at least a few of them were, anyways, and they took a big hit.
Yeah, and Lars Ulrich was the mouth of that. But, yeah, he was out there all the time complaining about his copyright concerns and everything else. I don't think that he had the wherewithal to imagine the state of affairs we live in now.
Right. The Internet was just a budding thing there, and it's really taken off considerably since then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, MP3s, which I had access to in the 90s, were not thought to be a viable way of transferring quality music. Nowadays, look at them.
Exactly.
I was still using, they had something called Real Audio. They had, you have your WAV formats, which people still use today. But they're very large, cumbersome kind of files. And, even though we have increased computer capability in the past 10 years, I don't know how many fold at this point. But it's still a consideration. But I think that the more that all this really does is justify the moves that are going to be made by the people that are so involved in intellectual properties. I think that's going to be the big issue here that's going to come of this, and that's the real end of that story. In addition, though, it seems to me as though it's also necessary to sort of build the, quote, legacy, end quote, of our first black president as well. Because, in these last 2 lame duck years, I think he's going to put his stamp on a great many different things that are seen as, necessary for him to have, done something, to have sort of made himself an outstanding individual in presidential history. I think that's part of it, too.
Well, that doesn't really matter. The media will portray him as they have been for the last 5.5, 6 years now. They will portray him as the golden boy of the 21st century. They will continue the illusion that is, as far as the bombers goes.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, of course, telling you that they're fair and balanced because,
They're still going to have that tingle down their leg, though, but, as Chris Matthews once said, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, again, I just can't get away from the idea of the purple paradigm eaters out there that seem to accept that there's actually a red and a blue team. As simple and silly as that is, They're all just, corporate pitchmen of one form or another, and that's all there is.
You just happened to mention something funny. In the military, when they do exercises, they have, well, you mentioned red team, blue team. They have what's called red team, blue team. When they're doing exercises, they have some people that dress up as the bad guys, they put turbans on their head and wear the Middle Eastern garb, and they play act the bad guy. And then there's the good guys that are in the military outforms and they play the simulated role, and they call them red team, blue team.
Right, and they have the flags and everything for it too.
They do.
And and you got to love that. I mean, it's but it's the simulated warfare for public consumption. And meanwhile, the real things that are going on, the actual damage that's being done to societies across the planet, most noticeably by the American Empire, but by other regimes as well that are being backed by the banking interests and by the corporations, which are the tools of the banking interests. I mean, it's it's sad to me that there's actually debates regarding a lot of this stuff.
Oh yes, sorry, I was muted there. I just about forgot.
No problem.
Well, they've had well over a 100-year head start on us, Chuck. So it's not going to be easy to turn this kind of thing around, and it's might not do it in my lifetime. I am 50, but I'd like to see it, but it might not happen.
Right, and of course, in 5 more days, we can celebrate the 101st birthday of the Federal Reserve. So, let's remember that control mechanism. And because I'm pretty sure it was December 23rd that was signed into existence by Woodrow Wilson. I may be wrong; it might have been the 24th, but I'm pretty sure it was the 23rd. So. And this is something that concerns no one. It seems to have fallen on deaf ears out there regarding this stuff.
Well, when you try to tell somebody about the Federal Reserve and them having control of the Congress's purse and the White House purse, they and you also try to tell them that it's a private bank, not a federal institution. You get looked at like you have a third eye in the middle of your head.
Well, perhaps you do. That's why.
Right.
But it's okay. It's okay. Before I go any further, let me just get this out of the way, because every one of my shows, I seem to have somebody in the chat room who...
Did you see that in the chat?
What's that?
There's a question in there for me, I believe.
Yes, there is, and here's the thing. I'm just going to ask it, and I'm going to shut up and let you say whatever it is you want to say about it, because I'm always being bothered by this question, as if this is the largest question in the world to be asked to any guest I have. Here we go. Okay? The dancing Israelis on 9/11, do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What is your view about the dancing Israelis on 9/11, sir?
I think the dancing Israelis, excuse me, I know there's a lot of people out there that really want to believe that Israel and just the Khazarians, or whatever you want to call them, are in control of the world. I don't believe that for a second. I believe that there are many, many factions that are unseen. Families all over Europe, older European families, that are in a lot more control than the Israelis are. I think the Israelis were one part of the equation as far as 9/11. I mean, you have to look at the Israelis, you have to look at the Saudis, you have to look at the Pakistanis. You probably even have to look at the Russians. I'm sure that they had a slight little tentacle in the whole scheme. You have to look at the the British. You have to look at the there's just too many countries, too many factions, too many intelligence agencies that had a hand in it. You had too many big corporations that had a hand in it. We've talked about these big corporations on, I think, the first show. Bechtel, Kellogg Brown or Root, Halliburton. We can go on and on and on with these military, with these MICs. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you got it.
MICs, yeah, or the IICs, or whatever you want to call them. Intelligence Industrial Complex, yeah. There's just too many factions to have one scapegoat. Let me put it to you that way, Chuck.
Well, right, and here's the thing. I mean, as I have tried to cover on some of my shows, I mean, I do think it all traces right back to the Rothschilds holding most of the strings, and all of that. But to not look at the greater cabal regarding this, I think is far too short-sighted. So I think you and I kind of come together on that. And that's what the reality is here. I mean, and the one thing that you didn't mention is, of course, the American interests that were more than happy to get involved in it, that were more than happy to benefit from it. Actually, you did mention those who benefited. Sorry, Let me take that back. You did benefit some of those who benefited from it, but I think there was a lot of them that did.
Too. I forgot Carlisle in there.
Yep. And this is part of the reality, and it was part of a greater scheme, and the greater scheme we are seeing unfolding now. Okay, that is my opinion, mind you. It is a means to an end. It is a matter of control, and to take Vatican City or New York City or the city of London, as it were, or to take, well, skipping New York City, the District of Semiramis, Columbia. When we look at that particular triad of interactions, and we take a look at the greater controls via the Rothschilds through the monetary system as it stands, and I guarantee you we have not even begun to reckon with the full picture there. This is where it all comes from. I mean, that's just my opinion. But of course, that doesn't get us to prosecuting any of the actors on that day. That doesn't get us to, really taking a good look at people like Bremer, who ended up being the occupation governor. That doesn't take us, the occupation governor during the Iraqi occupation. And I'm holding up air quotes when I say that. You know what I'm talking about here. These actors who were specifically having their hands on the gear while a lot of other people were actually in the rear,
Chuck, I have more thoughts about 9/11 too.
Sure.
I think a lot of these intelligence agencies, a lot of these countries, needed to have a hand in there, and the Israelis happened to be one of them. There were reports that the Israelis tried to warn the Americans. There were reports that nearly every country tried to warn the White House and the Pentagon about this attack. They all knew it was coming. The three dancing Israelis. I don't even know if this was true or not, but they were supposedly on some type of a talk show in Israel, and said that they were just there to document the incident. Mm-hmm. This could possibly be true because these people that we're dealing with, they do love to look over their handiwork. And besides, a lot of people are disregarding what Dr. Judy Wood's evidence shows. Did we ever talk about Dr. Judy Wood and her directed energy?
No, I have actually tried to approach getting Judy Wood on my show. Because I don't necessarily subscribe to what she has to say, but I would like to hear it from her directly, because a lot of the stuff that is out there, the way it's being represented, is not accurate from what I can read. Okay.
I've had her on my show, and it's very, very long and very, very tedious. She has 2 3-hour shows. It's 6 hours, and She goes through a lot of evidence. I wish she would cut it down to about hour and a half to maybe 2 hours. She could and still do a very good presentation. But she shows video evidence, and it's very, very hard to dismiss that evidence with concrete and steel just vanishing into thin air. There's a 75-foot long beam that people can see on a video today still that just disappears. This beam is like 75 foot long, and it's like 2.5 to 3 feet wide. Inch and a quarter to inch and a half steel, and it just vanishes into thin air, disintegrates. What does that to steel?
Well, right, and there's a whole myriad of different things that happen on that day that are just past impossible by a long shot, by conventional thought processes, right. And the idea that the jet plane fuel took down these towers and Building 7 and all this other wonderful stuff is just not logical based on what they presented to us. Yeah. So I'm definitely.
I'm not saying I subscribe to her evidence and her theory. I'm just saying I'm not going to disregard it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I don't disregard any of this stuff, and at this point, because I still have not received a logical explanation, in my opinion, for what occurred. Therefore, yeah. If you want an answer, you have to keep going. You know what I mean? It's
look at the way the people that go for the no plane theory. I'm not saying that I subscribe to that theory either, but I'm not going to disregard it either. Anyone can see that plane does not crash into that building. That plane gets more or less enveloped into that building. It gets, what's a better word for it? I don't know, just enveloped is probably the best word I can think of right now. That I don't believe that plane, if there was a plane, crashed into that building. It just looked like it just...
Well, it's a strange thing, because what happens here is that aluminum, and I mean, not even really, I mean, in some cases it could be they call it.
Well, yeah, that's just the outside, but there are steel. I mean, there is plenty of steel that holds that aluminum together, though. There are many, many sub-beams along on the outside of the, there's the inner, I think it was like 8 very, very thick beams, and then they built the floors on those, and then they got the smaller outer beams.
Oh, right. What I'm talking about when I mean aluminum is the plane, not the building.
Oh, yes.
So I'm starting with that. If you take a look at the idea of basically an aluminum can, okay,
into a steel wall.
Right. I mean, that's essentially what happened. It doesn't behave as you would imagine it. Think about it. If you took a steel bat and you hit an aluminum can, regardless of the fact that, let's just say you had a full soda can that was sealed, okay, and you smashed it with a steel bat, the steel bat is going to win. And in the case of these planes hitting the buildings, from the appearance of the film, at the very least, it seems as though the aluminum, which should have basically crushed up against most of the building, made it through.
Has anyone, or have you, Chuck, have you ever seen pictures of an airplane? The big DC airplanes that allegedly hit the buildings. A goose or a duck or some other kind of bird that hits the nose cone just destroys it.
Well, right. It doesn't take very much.
No.
Because, again, they're made of lightweight material. And one thing you can say about the 2 towers that were supposedly struck is the fact that they're not made of lightweight extremely malleable kind of weak material.
Yeah.
And when you look at the construction of it, it does beg a lot of questions. And then, the ridiculousness of Building 7 still, nobody's got a concise answer for that one.
Well, it was omitted in the 9/11 report anyways. They just left it right out.
Oh, yeah, but look, they learned their lessons from the Warren Commission because they didn't bother to publish the evidence along with the report. They had to have, unanimous consent among the committee in order to publish anything anyway. So, still with the 28 pages, right?
Right, yeah.
Because the funding, it doesn't matter, right, Hillary? It doesn't really matter who funded it or anything,
Or why does it matter? Is that what the question was, or something? Or
something like that, yeah. But either way, I mean, again, another sort of, well, here's a limited hangout, and now let's just forget all about it and continue on with the program already in progress, which is to storm into the Middle East, and Iraq is part of the equation for some odd reason, regardless of the fact that we were already engaged in Afghanistan, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, look at what Albert Pike wrote back 150 some odd years ago. He wrote of the three coming wars, and the Muslim and the Christian war, and or the Muslim against the Israeli war, Israel's, and they started demonizing the Muslim back at the beginning of the 20th century with the silent pictures.
Well, right, and that was, again, but they got kind of distracted for a little while because it was time to dehumanize, the Germans into Huns and, the Japanese and on,
yeah.
Right, and of course the Cossacks over there in, in the Soviet Union and all of this kind of stuff. All of these things had to go on.
Yeah. A very, very little known fact to a lot of people, Charles, that they taught me in school, and I don't know if I ever mentioned it to you, but they let the wrong man into college because it kind of backfired on them. But they taught me that there are only two isms. One is collectivism and the other is individualism. Collectivism has many, many forms, as far as communism, Marxism, fascism. Those are the three main isms as far as collectivism goes. And I don't know, it's just a lot of people just don't realize that.
Well, right, and this is what it all comes down to, really, and I do adore the definition of fascism as presented to us by Benito Mussolini himself.
Yeah.
Because after all, it kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it, Stephen?
I think there's a quote that is attributed to Mao Zedong. He said something like, "Control comes at the butt of a gun," or "Control comes from a butt of a gun." Right.
I think it was the barrel of a gun, but either way,
that's or something like that.
Yeah, and despite the fact that he was pretty much strung out on drugs and crazy by the time Richard Nixon decided to go visit him.
Yeah, right.
It still stands though, and of course that regime. If you want to talk about a brutal regime that we do business with constantly, I mean, who do we do business with more than China at this point? I mean, after all, if you didn't have China, you wouldn't have a Wally Mart,
Wally World, yeah,
where you could go and get your good cheap slave goods in order to make sure that there's no way in the world that anything can be manufactured in this country, because you can't get it for $5 if it's manufactured here.
I heard somebody argue. Well, it was kind of a feeble argument last week. I was watching something on television. I don't even know what it was now, but they were talking about China and the slave labor over there, and they were really trying to pull at the heartstrings of the watcher, so to speak, because, well, these people are so poor and so destitute over there that they fight over these 42-cent an hour jobs, and if if we don't go to these places like Walmart and Costco and buy these people's materials and their clothes and their whatnot, they're going to starve to death, Chuck. And we just can't do something like that.
Oh, right. And of course, totally omitting the fact in my mind, I mean, look, I'm not an economics guy exactly, but it seems to me as though the rise of any great economy is generally founded almost exclusively on some sort of slave labor. Yeah. I mean, that's where the foundation is laid. It always is. I mean, these economies, the way that they are structured and the things that people want to get back, and I mean, believe me, I am not happy about suffering in the economy that I still suffer in. I mean, you know, you and I have had some personal discussions. You know that I'm not exactly enjoying myself from an economic standpoint at this point. You know, and I know you're not either, but the point is, I don't know anybody who is. But regardless, the thing is, we didn't have the glut of slave labor. It's now being reconstructed again by sort of demeaning the workforce, by causing wages to be completely out of equilibrium with the cost of living, which causes, you know, a greater amount of dedication to the plantation, as it were, in order to make things well. And this is the slow squeeze process, and this is what we've been enduring for probably 20 years at this point, you know. But this is, again, my opinions, and hey, I'm not an economist, and, you know, what does Ochelli know, right? And, of course, the guys in chat like to call me Ochelliberg all the time because I don't want to scream that everything is a Zionist conspiracy. But
right.
But it's okay. It's okay. I understand. I would just rather see none of us be slaves anywhere in the world, and I don't care if it's the people that have a slightly different skin tone than me over in China, or if it's some level of brown skinned person somewhere else. I really don't care. I'd rather see human beings not be slaves at all.
Well, you know what, Chuck?
Any of these engines.
I heard it said one time that the people over there in the Middle East, especially the ones that are really supposedly and allegedly the radical Muslims over there, they're kind of like the rednecks over here in America. What they love is God, guns, and girls. That's really what it boils down to them people over there too. Yeah, well, that is an interesting way to look at it, and it is true. And of course, instead of thumping the Bible, they wash their hands and pick up the Quran. That's the only difference. Yeah. Again, I say that, and of course, I get crap for that kind of thing too, because I'm rather flippant about it, but it's the truth, man. I believe it is too. I mean, look at why they are actually being called terrorists, because many nations went over into their country and invaded them over a lie.
Oh, right, and of course, it fits perfectly in with the the psychology that allows one to believe that those of us who are speaking out and thinking for ourselves are also the what did the Prime Minister of England call us again? What was it? The non-violent extremists are just as dangerous as the terrorists, right?
They are. Sure, they are. Yeah, because. Well, if you don't believe everything that your loving queen or your loving president does and says, you must be out of the norm.
Well, right, and of course they have the additional leverage in our supposedly free and integrated society here of calling you a racist if you attack Obama too much, And here's the thing, guess what?
It's the same for the Israelis. If you don't like what they're doing, you're an anti-Semitic.
Well, exactly, and that is part of the point. There is that of course, that's a very convenient sort of blanket to throw over anybody who says anything about this. And of course, Zionism is not the same as Judaism. Let's keep that in mind. And don't forget, Joe Biden told us that. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
A Jew to be a Zionist. That's right. Just ask, like you said, Joe Biden and. What's the other? John McCain.
Right, two perfectly positioned, puppets of power out there that are in a great spot. See, and that's the thing. This is why there's even virtually no discussion of the vice president even attempting to run, in 2016, because I think every once in a while he forgets his script.
Say, I don't know. Would you like me to bow out here, and you can have the rest of the last hour for yourself with your next guest, or?
Well, I was kind of hoping that you might stick around a bit. He hasn't quite joined us yet, and I'm kind of surprised because
just for a little bit then, I guess. But
yeah, he's due. But you know what? I want to tell people where they can find your show. By the way, I know that it airs on Revolution Radio.
It does on Sunday afternoons from 3 till 5. And I'm on the Liberty Beacon Radio Network Fridays at 7 till 8.
By the way, you can do the whole thing over there if you want to. Just so you know. We had you just cut down to the 1 hour over there, but as of now, if you want, you can do that full out, and we're going to reorganize over there too. So.
Oh, okay.
There's going to be some things going on.
Well, I haven't heard. I haven't been around the last 3 weeks, but
you were kind of out of the loop. And personally, tell you the truth, I was more concerned about your health than really discussing those issues with you. But just so you know, feel free to plug in the whole thing over there because the other show that would have taken up some of your time is no longer taking up your time. So
an hour's fine with me. If I can get to that would be fine also. But I have to see. But
no problem. Well, till after the beginning of the year, it's up to you. So
I'm also on People's Internet Radio on Wednesdays from 7 till 9. So
right, and all those times are Eastern, right?
Yes, they are all Eastern.
Okay, and People's Internet Radio is an interesting thing too, because they're actually out of Ireland, right?
Yes, they are out of Dublin, Ireland. A lot of Irish, a lot of English, a lot of Spaniards over there, Australians, a lot of just a lot of big, diverse European Union over there.
Right, and they've recently picked up some more Americans. It seems like.
They have, yeah. We need to bring that kind of a message over here to America. People just don't know what their power is, and they teach. They just teach passive language and sovereignty. I mean, you don't have to get a gun to get something done.
Right. And that is part of the equation at this point too, because although I do support people's right to arm themselves and all that.
Well, I do too. But we don't have to go flying off half-cocked about stuff all the time. You really don't.
Well, right, and the actual victory is not going to be had with the small arms that we can compile privately. It's just not going to be had that way.
No,
at this point in time.
It's going to be the victories are going to be had with the good kind of collectivism. There's the bad collectivisms, and then there's a good collectivism. If people can find a cause that is good and passive and non-violent, then I'm all for that kind of collectivism.
Well, right, and I think if we don't change our internal beings quite a bit, if we don't sort of readjust our own thinking and get out of these ruts which have been laid out before us.
Yeah, I just thought of something else, Chuck.
Sure.
You know why they teach military and police to take control of a situation, no matter what the situation is, whether it's somebody they're talking to a civilian or something on a just any kind of a situation. They teach military and police to take control of that situation because they don't want them listening to whoever they're talking to. They want them to take charge. They don't want the truth getting to the military and the police.
Well, right, and this is why they always dissuade them from listening to guys like us, Stephen.
Exactly. Because we're crazy. It looks like we have our other guest here, Chuck.
Yes, we do. So, Mr. Ford, how are you tonight?
Yes, hey, this is the humble Dr. Ford calling in. Yes.
Hey,
are we on the air?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
Say, Greg, do you think I was off on? Do you think I was off on my assessment on that last little statement there?
I can hear all of it. I was too busy today speaking to Senator Feinstein's committee, the Intelligence Committee,
right,
and letting him know that I'm going public with my court case issues. Okay, which are, of course, the Copper Green program, which should be shaking America right down to its toenails, and the weapons of mass destruction issue, which should be anybody that has both hemispheres working in their brain should be thoroughly outraged over, since we just went to war and we're right back in the same war over the same issues. Okay, weapons of mass destruction and nuclear triggers now. All right, and on top of everything else, as I told Senator Feinstein's committee, all right, that the majority of people that make up ISIS that are terrorizing Iraq and Syria now are graduates from our torture program. So yes, that's what kind of day it's been.
Sounds like fun. Greg.
Well, how did the people over at the committee there take your input, sir?
Well, let me see. Well, they've been dealing with me for 10 years. Okay, I am the original source for the torture investigation. All right, and I think I've mentioned on both your shows, that I was the one who actually informed Senator Feinstein, Senator Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi, Barbara Boxer, and John McCain. Okay, originally I notified them when I came back from being renditioned, tortured, and abducted myself. All right, in dealing with these torture issues. Now, I can say one thing, and I've been watching this NPR, National Public Radio, and public broadcasting system, all the hand-wringing coming from the agency about these torture issues. Oh, weak sister this, weak sister that. Oh, we had tears in our eyes. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. Well, it's funny because, the torture really hasn't stopped. And I didn't see any hesitation at all on the sides of the agency people and military Department of Defense people when it came to torturing another human being. All right, torture is not in the lexicon of American history and government. All right, torture is not a state tool. Okay, used by the American government in dealing with people. It never has been. And the irony is, as I pointed out to Senator Feinstein, it came into existence at the behest and the request of somebody named Dick Cheney. All right? Gosh, now there is an exemplary human being in every sense and fashion, and who has done nothing but stand up for our patriotism and fight bad people all his life. Okay? Yeah, bottom line, of course, is money, and all of this. But when Dick Cheney goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office in San Francisco, no less. Okay, boy, figure that one out. I thought San Francisco was supposed to be liberal, and they're supposed to be concerned about these issues. And he had a list of certain targeted U.S. attorneys. Okay, at the top of the list was an attorney by the name of John Yoo, all right, Y-O-O, and they asked John Yoo, they said, would you write up a torture memo? And John Yoo said, hey, that's great. Here's why I'll do it, because, quote, I am bored shitless. That was the exact words he used. Bored shitless working for the U.S. Attorney's Office, and was going to leave in a couple of days anyway. And, of course, now they've covered it up with some gobbledygook about how he was born and how he's Korean and he didn't want to see, something happened to America like happened to South Korea from North Korea and all this other, it's hard to describe, the nonsense that comes out of these people's mouths. Well, that's why John Yoo, with the help of Jay Bybee, and William Haynes, put together torture memos justifying torture to go on in El Salvador, death squads to be formed in El Salvador, Nigeria, death squads that were formed with American contractors in Nigeria, and death squads, Shia death squads, were to be formed in the country of Iraq, the autonomous sovereign country of Iraq. All right, and they did it. You think there was any kind of anxiety, that the U.S. Attorney's Office exhibited? By the way, for your listeners, if your listeners are listening, look this case up. I'll give you my case. If you want to see how much anxiety was exhibited by the U.S. Attorney's Office when it came to, organ failure torture memos, look at my case. Here's the number: 14-15050. That's 14-15050. All right? My case will tell the American people exactly why we went to war, why we went to war, which was to clean up the Bush family mess, and weapons of mass destruction sales, and because there were weapons that were unaccounted for, in Iraq, and something called the Copper Green program that had evolved out of the torture program. All right, read my, I'd love to have all your listeners listen to my case, and read my case. Because I'd love to hear the courts give me some definitions about why this is all okay, why we invaded the sovereign country of Iraq and had the longest ground war in U.S. history, didn't accomplish a single thing after trillions of dollars, thousands of Americans dead, and then turn right around, a couple years later and have to go back in to fight the very same people that were graduates from our torture program. And here's the CIA saying how upset they were that they had to, quote, use torture, and Jose Rodriguez, who ran the program, saying how upset he was because he hid all the evidence from investigators, and then they tried to hold him accountable. I'm sorry, it's been one of those days, folks, and that's why I'm just so tired of this double speak, backstabbing, hypocrisy coming from a government that the American people pay for, all right? It's the American people who pay for this government, and that's the American people who paid for this disaster so far. So that's what kind of day it's been with Senator Feinstein's committee.
Well, yeah, and of course this is really the continuation of what was established, in my opinion, during the Vietnam War, which is the concept of brushfire warfare, where you have conflicts with absolutely no exit strategy. You have conflict for the sake of conflict. I mean, look, even if you were to sit and create a linear timeline for the battles during the Vietnam War and try and make sense of what territory was being gained and everything else, you can't. Because it was just the continuation of warfare for the sake of the continuation of warfare for the sake of the continuation of warfare. And I'm hoping you're getting my point. This is exactly the purpose of it. And of course,
the Phoenix program, that all this nonsense started. Operation Q Bark, came from which by the way, the agency is moving, heaven and earth to try to hide right now. Operation Q-Bark, because the International Committee on Human Rights in The Hague is investigating Operation Q-Bark, which is a evolutionary stepchild from the Phoenix program in Vietnam. That's how all this nonsense started. Was the Phoenix program, counterinsurgency, the Phoenix program. That's where we got this from. All right, and of course, always remember where this starts. This always starts with one or two people. These programs, And in that case, even in Vietnam, okay, there was somebody named, again, Dick Cheney, all right? Dick Cheney had 7 deferments to keep from going to Vietnam. 7 deferments, okay? And on the last one, where he just simply could not get out of, you know, being the scion child of a robber baron family, he had to go, and magically and mysteriously, his wife, Lynn, okay? Lynn, who likes to write, you know, the lesbian, Japanese lesbian sadomasochism books, okay? You know, I mean, that's a mouthful, I know. But his wife Lynn, all of a sudden turns up on the night before Dick Cheney is supposed to go into the draft board and go get drafted and actually defend his country. Okay, she all of a sudden magically becomes pregnant. Okay, I mean, how do these people time this stuff? Okay, how do they do this? You know, I mean, I guess the rich really are different.
Say great.
Well, it's just like they disappeared the whole DWI thing in order to let him become, have his prominent White House position in the Ford administration, of course, in case anybody forgot. And, I know, Steve Roberts, you've got some things to do, sir. So I'm going to let you out of this one, but I want to mention one more time that Cancel the Cabal, we mentioned the various places you can find Steve, and I'm telling you, he's a guy that I'm happy to call my friend, and someone that definitely does things a little different than me, but is definitely somebody that I appreciate and admire out there, among others who do similar things to myself. So.
Well, thank you, Chuck. I just wanted to tell you one thing, Greg. It's called a turkey baster. But thanks for having me on again, Chuck.
Take care, Steve.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Steve.
Yeah, okay. And I'm telling you, Greg, it's just another example of what went wrong, regarding people not paying attention to what our country was doing on our behalf. Because let's not forget, all of this stuff. And, if you want to talk to a decimated people, the Vietnamese might have something to say about it as well. Like I've mentioned many, many times, there are the, 58,000 deaths that we, of course, recognized by U.S. soldiers during that conflict, which, continued on for at least 7 more years than it needed to, but people often forget the over 1 million men returned back here damaged. Okay, and damaged in various ways. I mean, I'm using that as a very broad kind of category, and of course, anywhere from 1.5 to 4 million Vietnamese that were dead during that time as well. And over the course of time, there were many, many abuses right then and there that people did not pay attention to. There was what they called for a little while the Vietnam guilt syndrome in this country. Regarding what happened to the men and women that were, men really, that were sent to go and supposedly support our interests in Asia, in that region in Southeast Asia. And of course, we have an echo, again, of the same thing here in the Middle East. And of course, this is all very much linked to project, to the Phoenix program. This is all intertwined, and I love the way that somebody put it to me recently, and I can't even remember the complete phrase, but it tied together the narco-state interests along with the military-industrial complex, along with the banking interests, all into one phrase, and this is what it is, the interplay and the sort of incestuous relationships between all of these interests. And this is why it really doesn't matter what you do to human beings, because at the end of the day, it's all about who profits, who gains. It's all, cui bono. That's what it is, and it's absolutely sickening, and it's not part of the country that I thought I was born into, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
I look back when I was 8 years old. I was going to James Madison Elementary in Pasadena, California, and oh gosh, it was about maybe I'm guessing 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and we were out on the playground, and we heard a whistle blow, and the teacher. This was in November of '63, and a teacher calls us all together and says, "Okay, everybody here, you have to go back to your classroom, and your teacher's going to excuse you because the President of the United States has just been shot." Okay, has just been shot. So we went back. I got my little brother, okay, who was in his classroom. He was 5, I was 8, and back then, you could walk home. If you were an 8-year-old child, you could walk home, a couple of blocks and almost be guaranteed that you'd make it home without being abducted or molested or put into MK Ultra programs, for raising assassins, for the CIA or anything like that. It was pretty much guaranteed that you would make it home in one piece. So I took my little brother by the hand and went home and turned on the TV, and black and white TV, and there was, the first thing I see is a plane landing in Washington, and Jackie Kennedy getting off the plane wearing, a pink dress and little pillbox pink hat, and they're offloading the coffin of JFK, and that was more than an 8-year-old could comprehend. And I was upset, really, because I couldn't watch Superman, George Reeves, the original series. Right. But nevertheless, that was the beginning, in my mind, how this was kind of a smoke and mirror convolution. Even as a child, I started sensing something really wrong in our society, and then a day later, somebody named Lee Harvey Oswald, who was supposedly the assassin of Kennedy, was shot by somebody named Jack Ruby. And then it was a few years later when somebody said, "Look, here's a picture of somebody that was working for the CIA standing there watching the JFK motorcade named George H.W. Bush." And I saw the picture not too long ago. Okay, there's George H.W. Bush. And, I can actually say, now I look back, and I can see a very consistent pattern involving, from World War II, Prescott Bush, World War II to the present, okay, a very serious, established event of tragedies involving the Bush crime family. All right, I mean,
well, right,
it's very clearly established.
Let me just run a couple things by you, because first of all, that picture of him standing in Dealey Plaza is arguable. Okay, but and based on my research, I think it was actually in Alice, Texas at the time. But here's the problem. The guy later on claims that he wasn't involved in the CIA. It turns out he was. We have J. Edgar Hoover's memo to prove that. Of course, why is it that George H.W. Bush of the CIA has to be there in order to receive information regarding these anti-Castro Cubans that may have been involved in the assassination, and so on and so on? It's all very, very strange, and it's all a lot of smoke and mirrors. Now, the weird thing here is, and the greater point that you're making, all the way back to Prescott Bush, and even previous to that, if you dig hard enough. But the easiest stuff to find is Prescott Bush's involvement regarding, the trading with the enemies deal, the whole bit about funding foreign enemies of this country, and so on and so forth. And all of that gets swept under the rug. Meanwhile, his son is later on named for 1 year to the head of the CIA. After claiming that he absolutely had no involvement with the CIA previously. So really, he's got a perjury charge that really should have been brought to him, to begin with. Because if you remember when he was being confirmed, because of course Ford is the one who gave him that spot, who just happened to be Warren Commissioner Gerald Ford, by the way, representative from Michigan, who nobody ever heard of, except for the fact that he was snitching directly to the FBI at the time. So I clarify all this stuff as best I can. But the nexus of nonsense that went on, of course, brings us to Cuba a little bit, because the Bushes were involved in the intrigue regarding Cuba, the whole interesting incursions of the agencies into Cuba for industrial and also populist sabotage, absolutely raining down terror, in truth, real terror upon the people of that island nation. And George H.W. Bush, via his supposedly corporation interests and different companies that he had, which were relatively close to that island nation at the time, and through the oil company Zapata Petroleum, was absolutely part of the tools that was being utilized there. This is where he was kind of making his bones regarding, political sabotage, black operations, and things like this. And it continued on as he took the vice presidency in the Reagan administration, right? And of course we've all heard of Iran-Contra, And I'm not even touching W yet. Not even touching W yet, am I?
No. Yeah, you've got a ways to go, by the way. I was speaking to George Butler today, and on his show, and I was telling him about the non-negotiable bearer bonds that I had in my hands about a year ago, and these non-negotiable bearer bonds, these were the real ones, real non-negotiable bearer bond certificates, and the point with these bonds is that they were issued to the Bush family, all right, the Bush family, Prescott Bush, for something like this, okay, everybody thinks the Bush family made their money in oil. Well, no, they didn't, okay. They made their money off of chemical patents, and the first one that they made big money off of was something called Cyclone B. Cyclone B. I'm sure your listeners know or have heard of something sinister called Cyclone B. Well, this affects me directly, okay? And Cyclone B was used to kill millions and millions of Jews in concentration camps, okay? So, all right, well, these bearer bonds, they stamp right on them, 5%, even in the situation of wartime, these bearer bonds will be paid 5%. Okay, and these bonds were paid on the royalties of IG Farben. All right, IG Farben, and which produced Cyclone B, for the Prescott Bush family, and the 5% royalties were paid to purchase. And the non-negotiable bearer bonds that were invested into Rhineland-Westphalia Electric Utilities, which is IG Farben is the largest chemical company in the world now, presently. And Rhineland-Westphalia Electric is the largest utility company in the world presently, all right? So Mr. Prescott Bush, he was a large investor in Nazi Germany, all right? And they were producing very bad chemicals that later on produced something called VX gas, okay? VX gas, sinister, very bad, okay, dropped on Kurds, dropped on Iranians, and yours truly, the humble guy that I am, was in a bunker in Iraq, and I find 29 warheads, P-400 converted bomb canisters with bills of lading strapped to the casings, packing cases, that state that these weapons were ordered for the Carlyle Group. Okay, is there anybody in the whole world that doesn't know the connection between George H.W. Bush and the Carlyle Group? Okay, I think even my grandmother knows the connection, and she doesn't want to know. All right, so here's these 29 warheads, and which the commander of the fighter bomber wing, the Iraqi fighter bomber wing, who had dropped the previous weapons on the Kurds, and everybody saw pictures of the dead, the mothers running for their lives with their children, dying in mid-step with this VX gas dropped on their heads, and also saw pictures of the hundreds of thousands of Iranian troops in the Shatt al-Rab waterway where these weapons were dropped on their heads. Okay, well, reading through the bills of lading, these that were strapped to each case. Now, these documents were some of the only surviving documents from the Bush, or what they call it, the Great Bush Document Purge. The first few months of the Iraq War, there was a massive purge going on, and most of your listeners don't know this. Very few people know this. Okay, there was a massive purge of any documents connecting George H.W. Bush, the Bush family, to the Hussein regime. I mean, what can you say? All right. Now, it was the Bush, George H.W. Bush, whose company Carlyle overrode the Senate prohibitions on the use of these weapons for offensive purposes. They were, by law, the U.S. Senate said these weapons cannot be used in anything other than a emergency defense position, a situation. Okay, position or situation. All right? The U.S. Senate said, no, these weapons can't be used. Well, a little surprise, Mr. George H.W. Bush, twice with the Senate, when they were trying to do away with chemical weapons, had the yes vote to not only keep those weapons, but he used his vote to produce some of the most lethal weapons on the face of the earth. On the face of the earth. Okay, the VX/GF, okay, which has no antidote, makes most radiation look like child's play. All right? And so there I am standing in a bunker looking at these things. I'm just a humble intelligence agent that got pulled out of his state job and medical school. I was halfway through medical school at the time, to go to Iraq, to stand here in this bunker. So a strange thing happened, though. Like I say, none of this ever acts the way our government says it's supposed to act and behave. Okay, none of these situations. So I immediately dispatch one of the dispersal doors off one of these weapons and take it to my commanding officer, who is now one of the defendants in my court case in San Francisco. All right? And had this weapon of mass destruction, which I think we invaded Iraq. Now, please, Chuck, tell me if I'm wrong. Didn't we invade Iraq for the sole purpose of stopping the use of weapons of mass destruction on mankind, on us?
It's an interesting situation because, after all, the idea, the mentality was out there that we did not topple the Hussein regime during Desert Storm because it would destabilize the region, right? So of course we had to revisit it because this guy had once again rebuilt his weapons of mass destruction and had his programs flying high again, despite being warned and inspected or attempted to be inspected by the UN and all this other good stuff, right? So we had to go in there as a humanitarian issue, right? But this is what it was, and like I said before, I mean, for many years I just felt as though it was, the shell game for W to go in there and clean up after Dad, because Dad didn't finish the job, because of course we were sold on the idea that this was some kind of wimp and everything else. But the reality behind the Bush leadership is that the people that are the most insidious in positions of power are actually, when they appear to be, wimpy or flimsy or not to be the strong man, as it were, it's generally a complete sham, because they're just these smarmy little sneaky rats in reality. And that's right. I did just get the former president of the United States a rat, which he is. point blank, and I don't care how many planes he jumps out of or whatever else, or how much people want to laud him as some great leader because he was, in the White House for 12 years and everything else. A rat is a rat is a rat, and it's that simple. Anyway, I digress. Back to it. Yeah, the whole justification for that war, the whole meme that was passed around before memes were memes, okay, was that we needed to go in there to defend the poor individuals that were being preyed upon on their own governmental regime in Iraq. It was necessary to topple the Hussein regime. It was necessary to go through the whole ridiculousness of his capture and the pictures that circulated with the flashlight in his mouth, and we found him in a hole, and we got him. All that other good stuff. It was all necessary to do what? Well, it seems as though, based on what you're telling us, it was necessary for Junior to go in and clean up Dad's mess, but it wasn't the mess that we thought it was. So that's really the bottom line here.
Well, I'm just a simple guy, Joe. I'm just a simple Joe. There's no question about it. I have lots of education. Sure, I have, years of experience, but when it comes right down to it, what can I say? I'm standing there. It's 130 degrees in this bunker. I'm reading about how our government has sent these weapons of mass destruction, and it was very clear. They had been reconfigured in Fort Rucker, Alabama. They had been transported for storage to Pine Bluffs, Arkansas. They had been shipped on railhead, to the, and I want the people of Texas to sit up and listen to this, the Houston Waterway, where they were loaded on the USS Wabash, all right, and they were shipped to first to Spain and then airlifted into Turkey. From Turkey, they were trucked over the border into, and this is over several years, okay. But the most recent I could find was October of 2002, okay. And those weapons that I looked at, October of 2002. That means when all this drum roll and run up to this, to going into Iraq, we were still sending weapons of mass destruction, VX/GF weapons, that were listed and registered on the Central Command's weapons logs. Their weapons logs. These weapons were registered. These weapons weren't operating in a vacuum. They had general supply service numbers on them, where anybody can order one of these weapons and drop it on somebody's head. Okay? That's what was going on. So, there I am saying, okay, all right, okay, I've got to get this to my commander. Okay? So what does my commander do? My commander, okay, talk about a little weekly rat, okay, they turn right around. They don't make any announcements to the world that weapons of mass destruction have been found. Oh, no. There's bigger fish to fry, okay, as in getting a lucrative job with a defense contractor after this war. So they specifically do not notify the American people that weapons of mass destruction have been found. No, they don't notify CNN, who is about, their transmitter, their uplink transmitter was about 100 yards away when all this was going on. They don't notify CNN. They notify Department of Defense, Pentagon, and Pentagon says, get rid of those weapons right now, as in ASAP, okay, as in stat, as in British technical intelligence coming in within 24 hours and moving those weapons into an arc furnace where they were, and it was all recorded on film, destroyed, okay? That's what happened to those weapons. Those are the last of the 29 weapons. Now, I've checked with the Hans Blix weapons inspectors. No, they were not notified that those weapons had been found. They were specifically looking for those weapons. They had the numbers, the serial numbers of those weapons, and they needed to record, what type of VX salts were in those weapons. They were looking desperately for those weapons. All right, that information was kept from the Hans Blix weapons inspection teams. So, okay, great, all right, and guess what? My commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, and Captain Victor Artiga, well, they just wait, and when they get back, okay, they notify the firm of Booz Allen, okay? Have you ever heard of Ed Snowden? Have your listeners ever heard of Ed Snowden?
Oh, yeah, well, we were discussing him earlier, yep.
Right. Booz Allen, okay? Gee, obviously, they don't mind working in the damaging position of affecting American interests, American citizens' interests. They don't mind doing it at all. And you're going to hear that name very shortly again in connection with Copper Green. So my commander, who has kept this all very quiet, okay, my discovery, and a fellow agent named Dave Debato, they keep his discovery very quiet, and what they do is they get rid of these weapons, and there was a couple of attempts to leak the information out, okay, like on ABC Nightline with Ted Koppel. The attempt was made there, and it was shut up quickly. It was stopped, fade to black quickly, kind of, in response to the fact that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So, needless to say, I said, okay, all right, I'm out of here. But the thing was, I knew about that. I knew about those weapons. And there's also another issue that was brewing, okay? And I need to get this out there because I spoke to the Feinstein Committee. It's concerning nuclear detonators, as in nuclear triggers, all right? The largest weapons depot in the world probably was the Alakaka facility just south of Balad. Surprise, several hundred detonators were in storage there. Those detonators disappeared very quickly, okay? Those detonators were the first, George W. Bush, his first order when he became President of the United States was an order to Admiral Tom Lopez, okay, at Los Alamos, New Mexico. Okay, that's where they designed nuclear pits, P-I-T-S. All right? And this is critical to me right now as I'm saying this. It's critical that your listeners listen. A thermonuclear weapon, its warhead is about 5 kilograms, okay, of enriched plutonium. And the way I understand it is that the nuclear pit is 2.5 kilograms, so it's about half the weight of a thermonuclear weapon. All right, and so here's the deal: that those weapons, amazingly, on somebody's orders, George, okay, if you're listening, George, were sent, and Admiral Tom Lopez escorted those weapons, okay, those triggers, at the behest of using Halliburton Logistics from Los Alamos to Iraq. Okay, and so, and of course, most people have the attention span of a housefly, so these things don't really relate to them. Okay, but the thing is right now in Iraq, those weapons are loose. Those triggers are loose. And if you've ever heard of a suitcase bomb, yes, guess what it is? It's 2.5 kilograms of nuclear pit. All right? And you turn a timer, you flip a switch, and you run. Okay? You don't want to be around it. Now, granted, it'll take out a dam. Granted, it'll take out a stadium full of people. But the point being is that it is a nuclear device. Okay? It was there in the Alakaka facility. All right? I sent this report in. It was everything I tell you and your listeners, Chuck, is recorded with the FBI. Okay? They already investigated, and they confirmed everything I've said, okay, concerning weapons of mass destruction, the early transport of those weapons into Syria. I'm surprised they're still finding them right now. I mean, virtually every week they find new weapons of mass destruction. But the interesting thing is nobody found those pits. Now we've got a very angry group of people running all over Iraq, very angry. In fact, they're the graduates of our torture program. Okay, remember the waterboarding in one end? Can you imagine? This must be a kinder, gentler thing, okay, in torture. All right? Now that was the George H.W. Bush thing. When he was ordering the death squads, okay, on Operation Q Bark in El Salvador, he was busy telling the American people how he is a kinder, gentler president, okay? And I heard John Brennan, the guy who stamped the visas of all 19 hijackers in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, so they could get into the United States to commit 9/11. Okay, I heard him say on the news that how wonderful he really is and how concerned they were because of all the people that they were torturing. They would forcibly, anally hydrate, rehydrate. Okay,
rectal rehydration, the actual term.
Right, yeah. Anal rehydration. Boy, that's the way to go. Okay, now I would know how I'd feel if somebody waterboarded me on one end, okay, like my mouth, and then they anally, forcibly, rectally rehydrated me, okay? All right? I know how I'd feel towards that person or person. Okay?
This is what they call getting you coming and going. I mean, really.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me of what the Bushes have done to the American people, all right?
Right.
I mean, very clearly, that's exactly what has happened here. Okay, but the thing is, those nuclear pits are now in the hands of about 5,000 very angry tortured graduates of the American torture program. Okay, they were at Abu Ghraib, Camp Bucca, all right, and they are running around loose now. And not only are they the best financed terrorist in the world, best financed because they're being paid by Saudi Arabia, and they now control most of the oil fields at Ramadi. But they have access to some of the finest intelligence database systems that their boss, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, okay, was when I was in Samarra, he was my asset in Samarra, and he ran Mukhabarat and the database in Mukhabarat, okay, in Samarra. All right.
Which aside from, just to clarify, what we were fed via the mainstream about, Saddam's power, his stranglehold on power having been, propagated by what did they call them? The Republican Guard, as it were. The truth is that his intelligence agency was what actually maintained his regime, and of course, this is what the Mukhabarat is. It was actually the intelligence agency that he was able to utilize in order to maintain control over his land as it was, right?
That's absolutely correct. And their sister group, Mukhabarat, Damascus, Syria. All right? Do any of your listeners see a pattern forming here? All right? If any of your listeners see what happens when you go into, when you start a war and you have no strategy whatsoever other than to hide your family's mess, your company mess, all right, and see what happens as a result when the dollar is the bottom line. I mean, this is what happens. Okay, we've got people now headed back, facing off. What was it today? They just had to launch. The Kurds had to launch some great big counterattack against ISIS, and they had to use American air power to do it. All right. I mean, as we speak, that is going on. That battle is going on as I'm saying this. So here we are, right back into this mess, and then all of a sudden, Senator Feinstein, okay, announces that she has the results of a 6-year-long investigation. Oh, goodness gracious, into torture, okay? Into torture.
Mm.
Okay. And as a result, the CIA is hand-wringing, and they're carrying on like weak sisters. Oh, we weren't responsible. Don't prosecute us. Don't interrupt anything. Okay, with the way we're trying to protect America. Well, yeah, but then again, here comes the fly in the ointment. Something called copper green. Okay, copper green is. And I think I explained copper green to your listeners once, but I'll do it again, okay? Copper green is a diabolical program again, okay? And I'd love any of your listeners to call in to think, now who could be that sinister and that evil, okay, and that brilliant and that well embedded in the American government to think of a program like what copper green is, where it's a pay-as-you-go torture program for internationally to utilize the logistical services of the American government and to be administered to by the Central Intelligence Agency, to have 68 countries send their troublemakers, their insurgents, their rebels, whoever they don't like, basically, send them into black ops sites where they can be tortured forever, okay, forever. They can be murdered for a fee, okay? Everybody understand this, okay? This is the American way. For a fee, okay? It's definitely the agency way, okay? For a fee, this can happen. And then they turn right around, okay, and the agency gets access to, first of all, control of that government, and secondly, natural resources to be exploited in that country, all for the simple fact of using torture, which they claim that they don't like to use. Okay, boy, the anxiety that I saw exhibited on NPR was just amazing. Okay, and PBS was just amazing. They don't like to hurt people, according to what they say. All right, and so we have a situation here where they're very angry now that copper green is coming out into the light of day. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, this is all part of the greater shell game, because what's happened is they put this stuff out, and then kind of dish off responsibility onto the military contractors, onto the individuals that, well, they weren't exactly part of our agency, they were part of something else, but all this stuff is intermingled. And I found it very interesting that there was actually an international feel to all this stuff, because as you stated before, I mean, it was British troops that disposed of these weapons, supposedly. It was... Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was the British troops that disposed of this stuff. You have the intermingling of these intelligence agencies that are localized to there, absolutely interacting with and giving up information and cooperating with, their supposed enemies. It's just like a constantly, revolving sort of game of flipping sides and choosing which way to go. And at the end of the day,
I'm on the air.
there is just a profit being made on both ends of this particular scale, and that's what happens, is that it is a matter of making profit on both ends of the equation. You get to be paid for the torture, you get to be paid for the disposal of the problems over there, which is something that has not actually been sort of spotlighted yet out in the information stream, that this was all part of sort of a mechanized profit making scheme regarding the brush fire, the perpetual warfare strategy that was is easily discernible by looking at the situation. And meanwhile, what does it really cost? Well, it's just human lives. It's not a big deal, and what does it actually matter regarding the humanity of the individuals over there? Because after all, it's perfectly acceptable to torture them because they are the ones who attacked us, and they are the ones who caused this problem, and they are the ones who brought it on themselves, right? You know, and also weird that you also saw other assets from other countries also being involved in this equation as well. Like I said, the British. At one point, you also saw Israeli involvement where it didn't belong. We mentioned that before. You know, amazing what was going on there. This nexus of you know, just brutalization of peoples for the purpose of profiteering, basically.
Well, you know, as I said, you know, for your listeners, you know, I mean, everybody thinks of an intelligence agent as kind of being like James Bond. You know, I mean, you terrorizing around in a Aston Martin and being able to, you know, basically tackle anybody and prevail. Well, no, we're all pretty average, and I'm pretty average. Okay, and I went to Iraq. You know, just the idea that first of all, I was going to retire from Iraq and call it a day. That's all. That's all I expected. After 30 years, I was going to call it a day. And so, you know, being in, you know, clandestine services, you know, I think I can say I've seen enough and done enough. And so I show up, you know, like I say, Mr. Average, you know, when I was in school, everybody was getting A's, you know, and I'd feel grateful to get a B minus. Okay, that's me. All right. You know, I'm average in every sense of the word. I didn't expect to do anything in history that was significant. Okay, that's me. And so I get there, and all of this is unfolding around me. And like I say, Copper Green, one of the most sinister programs that we haven't even scratched the surface of. In fact, you can't even find anything, any written reference to Copper Green that has been redacted. Okay. Yes, it is the sinister program, okay, that nobody wants to talk about, all right? So, but there was another issue that the taxpayers that are listening to your show need to hear about, okay? There was something called Matchbox, all right? Matchbox. One of my sources came to me. He wasn't a source very long. He'd been a Arab translating attorney for the company called Halliburton. There's that drum roll again, Halliburton, all right? I mean, how one company and one thug, you know, company officer could create the kind of havoc with America that it has is beyond me. I'm just stupefied by it all the time. I'm amazed by it. It's miraculous, all right? Well, yes, Dick Cheney, okay, is behind virtually everything bad, okay? Yes, whatever it is, that's bad, he's involved, all right? No question about it. Well, guess what? Matchbox is, and very few people talk about it, even fewer people know about it, okay? Well, like I said, my translating Arabic attorney, he was actually educated in Egypt, said, okay, here's what the real deal is with all this torture business.
We're down to the last minute, Greg. I just want to let you know because we're going to run out of time here.
Okay, I'll put it simply because I'm sure your guests want to hear about it. It's the greatest war profiteering scheme of oil shipments, okay, that did not exist in the entire history of the United States. And probably will be forever. That's what Matchbox is, and I'd love to give your folks details, but you say we're down to 1 minute, and which I regret, because I'd love to tell your listeners, okay? But next show, you have me on, I will tell them about Operation Matchbox, the greatest war profiteering scheme in all of history, all of world history, and the American people paid for it.
And we will definitely get into that on a future show. I want to thank you for joining us for this hour and going through all this. And I know you're repeating a lot of the stuff that we've already covered, but it bears repeating. Really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who tuned in, everybody who's in chat, everybody who decided to pick us up on the other ways that you can out there. This is the Ochelli effect. And I'll tell you something, this is one of the things that has occupied my thinking lately, and for quite some time. Frank Gregory Ford, I want you to go and check out his case. What's that case number again, sir?
Okay, that case number is 14-15050. And I want your listeners to also type in the name Abu Sager, ABUSEGER, and they will get my government records. They'll get my government documents of my abduction and the beating death of the Hussein banker.
Thanks everybody for listening. Everybody have a good night. We'll do this again. Bye.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, that guy, how can that be possible? You know, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know that the internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously.